Hello, students. You are welcome to session 5 of Unit 4. And in this session, we'll be looking at the roles of instructional materials in the teaching and learning of physics. My name is Patrick Ejay. Now, at the end of this session, you should be able to understand the role of instructional materials in teaching physics. So, students, what are the roles of instructional materials in the teaching and learning of physics? Now, remember in our previous session, we saw the different types of instructional materials. And we saw we have the audio, we have the visual aids, as well as the audio visual aids. And all these instructional materials play a major role in the effective teaching and learning of physics. So we also saw that instructional materials may not solve all the problems that we face in the classroom. However, they are able to enhance the teaching and learning of physics. And for that reason, not only are instructional materials a primary source of classroom science learning, but also professional development for teachers are often structured around instructional materials. So even we as teachers, the kind of programs that we undertake in order to qualify us as professional teachers depend strongly on the kind of materials we have been exposed to. Now, some of the materials we know, we have test materials. These are all instructional materials that are used in order to enhance learning. And so because instructional materials enhances the effective teaching of physics as well as its learning, teacher development programs, teacher professional development programs are all developed around these instructional materials, so that when teachers are being produced out of these various institutions, they can translate, or they can be able to translate the various aims and goals of the national curriculum into learning experiences that can be acquired by our learners in our various classrooms. And also, teachers decide what to teach in the classroom, and many teachers base their lesson plans on the class textbook and on other instructional materials rather than on the intended curriculum. So, when we take the physics syllabus, you realize the syllabus will only stipulate the various kind of content or topics that we are to teach. However, for teachers to effectively deliver, we have to consult different instructional materials such as textbooks, such as visual aids, audio visual aids. All these materials are being consulted, they are being integrated, they are being incorporated into our teaching in order to maximize students' learning. Now, in addition, another important effect of what teachers teach arises from our assessment practices. And we know that in Ghana, we base on the BECE to assess our students in the junior high school and the WASI to assess those in the senior high school. And so, for our students to be able to undergo or undertake this kind of assessment test and do well will depend on the kind of materials that you as a teacher you will consult in their preparation. And so we have several instructional materials at your disposal as a teacher, and when you are able to consult those that are appropriate and relevant to the various concepts you may want to teach, you realize that your students will sit for this assessment test and they come out with flying colors. However, when you're unable to, identify the relevant materials that can help your learners perform well, you will be teaching them although, but they will go and they will come back and be telling you the kind of things that we were taught were not the same things that we saw in the exam. This may be due to the fact that maybe the kind of materials that the teacher's lessons were based on were not those were not those that were appropriate and relevant to the content that were being taught. And in addition, instructional materials affect teaching directly or indirectly by influencing the greater community. So normally, parents or students will examine the learning that their kids or their wards are doing by considering the various test materials we recommend to them. Sometimes you recommend a textbook to a parent to buy, and the parent will tell you, no, this book I don't think will help. So, for parents, they normally use the content of the student materials. So, the content, the various things that their wards learn to determine the extent to which their wards or students are learning. And instructional materials also has the potential to initiate and sustain students' attention, concentration, and personal involvement during the teaching learning process. So because instructional materials sometimes some appeal to the sense of hearing, some appeal to the sense of sight, it has that potential where it will keep students, it will sustain their interest in the kind of teaching and learning that is taking place at a particular time. And it also brings remote events in the classroom. So things that sometimes we find it difficult to, carry to the classroom, with the use of instructional materials, we are able to take these things to the classroom, and it helps learners in their learning. And it also increases the meaningfulness of abstract concepts. So there are some concepts in physics that sometimes students find them so abstract that they do not even find any meaning in learning the kind of things. But with the use of instructional materials, it can bring some meaningfulness to these concepts that students originally may be having difficulties and challenges learning them. And finally, it provides clear, accurate, and vivid image during the process of learning. So the kind of things you'll be saying verbally with the use of instructional material, students are able to see what exactly you are trying to, give to them or present to them at a particular point in time. Now let's look at this example. Assuming a teacher wants to teach basic electricity or electricity, and we know that in electricity we'll be talking about current, and students are to perceive current. And the problem even becomes worse when the teacher gets to Kirchhoff's law and tells students that one of the laws is the branch where when current will get to a junction, that's the junction law, when the current will get to the junction and the current has to divide. But you realize that with this image that is being presented, the red arrows we are seeing are the current. And this is a junction. And we can see when the current gets to the junction, it divides. So some are moving top and others are moving down. And the students can even see that the area where we have the lower resistance will have the higher current. And the area with the higher resistance will have the lower current. Students can also see that current always moves from the negative terminal to the positive terminal of the cell. And you realize that this thing that we could let students perceive without getting any meaning out of the things we are saying becomes so clear and vivid. It becomes meaningful to them when we present them with such an instructional material. And this is just a visual aid. And this image was just created using the FET interactive simulation. Now, students, in this session, we look at the roles of instructional aids in teaching physics. Now, as we bring the session to an end, explain 3 roles of instructional materials